Hey, what's up guys? John here. Something very big is happening in the real estate market. And if you're a landlord or if you want to be, you should pay very, very close attention to these new laws and these new trends that are coming all across America, which I think are going to have a massive, massive impact on property valuations. I think we're going to see a wave of foreclosures much, much greater than 2008. I'm not being dramatic. When I go through all the data here, you're going to see exactly what I see. In this video, that's exactly what I'm going to do for you. So please hit the like button. When you hit the like button, YouTube's going to share this content to educate more people about what's really going on in the real estate market. And also, if you'd like to invest in real estate, or if you maybe are in high interest credit card debt, or you're in a situation in which bad credit's holding you back, we would love to give you a free consultation to see how we can help you at GreatCreditFast.com. That's GreatCreditFast.com. You can call us at 561-430-5900. We're getting exceptional results for our clients, removing over 100 negative items per day off of clients' credit reports. So we are helping a lot of people. We love to see how we can help you. Take a look at this. Landlord fines for building emissions could hit $900 million by 2030. Local Law 97 is going to be costly in New York City. This isn't just New York City. So I'm going to show you this first. I'm going to show you a few other cities where this is going down in and exactly how this whole thing's playing out. According to a report, projected fines when the regulation comes into effect, more than 3,700 properties may run afoul of the law, and penalties could soar as high as $200 million next year. Now, I'm going to tell the editor to plug in some videos right here of me. I was walking in New York City recently, and almost every building had this grade. It was either an A, B, C, D, or F grade. Just like, when we went to school and the teacher would grade your test. That's exactly what's happening with all these buildings in New York City. They're getting these grades, and if they don't pass, they're going to get hit with all of these massive, massive fines. But these fines are happening at a very interesting time, because if we look at what happened over the last couple of years, these office buildings, these properties, these rentals have lost tremendous amounts of income, whether it be through an eviction moratorium, whether it be from the work from home policies, whatever it may be. These building owners are in very, very big trouble as they've lost tremendous revenue and now they're getting hit with massive bills. There's $200 million as soon as next year, according to the study conducted by Level Infrastructure and commissioned by the Real Estate Board of New York. Penalties are expected to worsen dramatically by 2030, the earliest year identified in the law's goals. This study projected owners of more than 13,500 properties may be fined a cumulative $900 million annually. Now you think, when these owners, these property owners, they bought these properties, they bought them based on a few different things. Probably the location, the current rental income, what they could potentially do for the property, maybe what this property would mean for their family legacy. There could be a variety of different reasons why they bought the property. But when they bought it, they probably had the belief that they owned it, that they had full right over everything that happened in that property, so long as they followed, some building inspections and, they followed the law. But now the law is changing. Now everything is changing. Now all these building owners are going to be hit with all of these new additional expenses. If they don't follow, then they're just going to get hit with one fine, and the next fine is going to be bigger, and then it's going to get bigger and bigger every single year until either they sell the property or they take care of whatever these upgrades are going to be. These upgrades are not going to be cheap. It's not going to be $100,000 or $200,000. They essentially have to, I'm going to go into this in a second, what they actually have to do with these properties. So the goal of Local Law 97 is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions across the city buildings by 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050. The limits begin taking effect next year, and penalties increase strongly at the start of the following decade. For owners, trying to come into compliance may be a struggle for the next few years. The study said more than 11,000 buildings will still be out of compliance by 2030 if every building reduced energy consumption by 15%, while more than 8,000 buildings would be out of compliance if every building reduced energy consumption 30%. Building owners facing the longest odds are multifamily rentals, along with co-ops and condo landlords due to general lack of resources. Of buildings expected to be out of compliance next year, the study cast owners in the sector as making up more than 60%. That share increases to 66% by 2030. Renminbi Senior Vice President Zachary Steinberg, in a statement, called on the city to take action over the next 12 months to avoid damage to our local economy and unfair penalties to property owners in 2024. The clock is ticking on landlords who have been scrambling to come into compliance with the law before the penalty phase begins. Glenwood Management has the city's first carbon capture rig in the residential building, even though the law doesn't explicitly cite carbon capture as a means of reaching the goal. Alloy Development is electrifying a building by using power of community solar panels and batteries to store intermittent output. In Williamsburg, a landlord is at odds with the residents as he tries to put lithium-ion storage batteries on his building's rooftop. Right? And so here's how it works. New York and 4 other cities target building energy use emissions with fines, Moody's report. One of these locations is in Florida. And believe it or not, a lot of people would say this is something only happens in New York, something only happens in California. It's happened in Miami. So New York City, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Boston, St. Louis are preparing to fine building owners who fail to comply with newly enacted or updated local regulations that in most cases limit large building greenhouse gas emissions and or curb energy use, according to a November 16th Moody Investor Service report. The fines, the earliest of which will go into effect next month in San Francisco, comes as a total of 30 U.S. municipalities are phasing in higher standards for commercial real estate emissions reductions and energy consumptions, according to the report. The cities moving forward with stricter environmental regulation standards span nearly every region, including Atlanta, Denver, Chicago, Miami, and Houston. So you have Florida, you have Texas. It's very fascinating to me because a lot of people have moved from New York and from Los Angeles and from cities that were landlords, and they bought properties here, thinking that if they bought properties in Florida and New York, that they'd be able to, business as usual, they'd be able to proceed. However, what's likely going to happen is we are, unfortunately, going to start to see things start in Houston and in Miami, and then it's going to go to, El Paso, it's going to go to Tampa, and it's going to go to all these different pockets all throughout the states, and it's just going to continue. While regulations vary the cost, could be a significant new line expense that would be borne by owners and possibly even tenants as all types of properties, including data centers, offices, mixed-use hotels. Darrell Wheeler, Vice President and Senior Credit Officer at Moody's, said in an interview, if you have a net lease, any new fines may disqualify as billable expenses, which could create an interesting discussion about whether that these can be charged back to the tenants. The growing patchwork of new local environmental regulations comes amid increased federal scrutiny of businesses, climate impact, and as investors have been investing in companies that adopt environmental, social, and governance best practices, the Securities and Exchange Commission is expected to soon publish a rule requiring publicly traded companies to provide detailed disclosures on carbon emissions. In light of new local regulations, Wheeler advised CFOs to review the emissions of buildings they occupy or own. If the renters of companies should ask if their lease permits landlords to pass through the cost of fines, right? So the landlords will be passing the cost onto, if they can, onto their tenants. And if they are renting a strip center or a warehouse or any type of office, and they're passing the cost on, what's ultimately going to happen? The tenants are going to likely pass the cost on to the consumer. And the consumer is already likely going to be in a financially distressed position like we've been seeing the last year or so. Everything's much, much more expensive. They're just going to be more inclined to shop online, Amazon. They're going to be making their purchases online. If they're going to be able to save 10 or 20 or 30% or more by doing so, they're going to do it, right? And so it's just going to be a really big impact to small and medium-sized business. And the core fundamentals of American business is you have roughly half of the U.S. population works for small business. 46% works for small business, and over 40% of small businesses missed November's rent, or they were unable to pay it in full. It's a pretty unbelievable number, right? In October, it was just over 30%. So it's been really picking up. As we start to see these policies start to come into effect, I believe it's just going to get worse and worse and worse for small and medium-sized businesses, unfortunately. For now, meeting new standards will be costly. Wheeler said that the cost of retrofitting properties with net zero emissions HVAC systems will vary with the situation. It could climb up to $60 per square foot, or about $6 million for 1 million square foot building. So a 20,000 square foot building, $6 a foot, you're looking at 120 grand, right? $120,000 just for the HVAC system, to put it into context, right? Even if you have a new HVAC system, over the last 4 years, it is not likely zero carbon, Wheeler said, noting that buildings will essentially need to be converted to electric heating and cooling systems. The standard of zero emissions requires you to consider other technologies that are available but expensive. This means your previous equipment is suddenly obsolete. Hopefully, the availability and the cost of this technology will improve as the upgrades become more common. San Francisco, with the goal of zero GHG emissions from large buildings by 2035, will be the first of 5 cities to implement fines. According to the report, beginning in December, properties that don't comply with new requirements will be fined $100 a day with a maximum of $25 in 25 days in a 12-month period. The fines in New York, Washington, D.C. are among the most erroneous, although those in Washington can be reduced if certain compliance plans are undertaken. New York passed a Climate Mobilization Act in December 2019, which placed GHG emission limits on commercial properties larger than 25,000 square feet. According to the report, properties that exceed the limits will face fines of $260 per metric ton over the limits starting next year, 2024, with stricter standards starting in 2030. Now, we look at how this whole thing plays out, right? This, to me, is very fascinating. A lot of these office buildings, strip centers, commercial properties, they were purchased 2018, 2019, based on probably a 3 to 5% vacancy rate, meaning if there's 100 units in the building, they would have 3 to 5 vacant, usually at all times. However, now if you look at the national average, it's 16.2%, right? So vacancy rate essentially tripled. This is the national average. When you look at cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, the vacancy rate is much, much greater. In some cases, 30, 40%. And so if you have all these landlords that purchased these properties in 2018, 2019, and they need to refinance these properties, and when they bought them, they put down 30%, right? So $100 million property, for example, or even a $10 million property, for example, they put $3 million down. They took a loan out for $7 million. Now, when they come back to refinance that loan, which they have to, because it's not a 30-year fixed rate loan, what's ultimately going to happen is the lender's going to say, how much income did you bring in last year? Or what about the year before that? Okay, they're looking at their income. Oh, your income dropped, 20%, right? Your income dropped 20%, 30%, 40%. Okay, and now you aren't going to be able to qualify for this refinance because you don't have the equity in the deal, and they're not going to be able to do it for you unless you put more money in. And so ultimately, what's going to happen? These landlords are going to be in very big trouble, especially when they now have to put in massive cash injections into these properties to make them compliant, right? And as they continue to move forward in this direction, I think what we're going to start to see is dominoes fall for a lot of landlords. So if you are thinking about investing in real estate, I would highly recommend that you pay very close attention to what's going on inside the municipality, the area that you want to invest in, and make sure that you're not going to be hit with any curveballs because sure, right now it's the commercial properties. But what I ultimately think is going to happen is I think it's going to be the residential properties over the next few years. I think this is going to be a really big thing. And when you look at what it would actually take to bring one of these buildings up to standard, think about this. No gas stoves. It would be no traditional fossil fuels, right? Everything would be solar. It's a very expensive endeavor. Like to put it into context, even in New York, for example, they were talking about they would check the envelope of your building. So they would go all around it, make sure that no heat is leaving the exterior through cracks in the old facade. And if it was, then you would have to essentially redo the whole exterior, right? There's huge expenses. And I think we're going to start to see this really creep up, especially, and I didn't even mention this, as interest rates, 2018, 2019, they might have been 4%, but now they're 6.5%, 7%. So the cost to actually get this debt is so much more expensive. The income's fallen, and now the cash injection that's going to be required by law to implement, I think it's just going to be a lot for a lot of landlords. What do you think about this entire situation? I'm going to leave all the notes below in this video inside the show notes. So click the link so you can go through it all yourself. Let me know your thoughts on this. This to me is pretty wild. I think it's going to really be something that we should all be very close attention to. Drop below, hit the like button, subscribe here. I know my second channel is an interactive call-in show and a podcast. If you need help fixing your credit, we would love to give you a free consultation at GreatCreditFast.com. That's GreatCreditFast.com. You can call us at 561-430-5900, 561-430-5900.